"And stick together," Mom shouted after me and my little brother as we ran from our campsite in the woods. "Kay," we called back the same way we ran, in unison. My brother Jer was about a year and a half younger than me. By that summer day when I was 6, there was no need for the reminder. A murderer in a hockey mask couldn't have pulled us apart. The Marshall Tucker Band's twangy love song faded from the truck's tape deck as we ran into the forest. The cicada and the wind in the trees became our new soundtrack. I loved being in the mountains, but I hoped we'd make it home that night. Camping without food, a tent, or blankets was never fun, no matter how hard I tried to pretend it was just another adventure. The Colorado mountains go on forever. And when Daddy wanted to go four-wheeling, he didn't go just a little off-road. He went way, way off-road. Jer and I bumped and bounced in the way back of the old 4x4 for what felt like hours, tree limbs scraping the roof and windshield of the old truck. "Roads are for pussies," Daddy would say with a beer between his legs and a cigarette in his left hand. His right, he kept on my mom's thigh. Riding shotgun, our 12-year-old stepbrother Scotty blew smoke rings into the air. "Slow down!" Mom's laughter almost made me feel we were a normal family. I don't remember what Jer and I did in the woods that day. Maybe we were playing hide and seek when we heard the truck's horn, the signal for us to come back. Only this time, it wasn't a couple of friendly beeps. It was a terrifying blare that lasted 30 seconds or a lifetime. When we came tearing through the woods, Daddy was already behind the wheel. His eyes were crazy, like the eyes of a horse stuck in a barn fire. "Get in." The back door was open, and we obeyed without question. As I climbed into the way back, I stopped cold. My mother and Scotty were already back there. He held my mother's head in his lap and cried as he stroked her long raven hair. Bubbly spittle oozed from the side of her mouth. The whites of her eyes were crescent moons under half-closed eyelids. Before I could ask what was going on, Daddy threw the truck into gear and drove like hell. I didn't understand until I was in my 20s that my mother had overdosed on something, and Daddy and Scotty were high as Everest. Daddy just told me she had gotten sick, and I believed him. Spoiler alert, she lived. One morning around the same time, I woke up shivering and wet. My eyes burned with tears and urine fumes. Shame slithered in my belly as I tiptoed to the door and put my ear against it. Satisfied everyone was still asleep, I crept to the hall closet to get a new sheet. Back in my room, I tore off the wet bedding. The old comforter was soggy but not soaked. Good. It was the only blanket I had. Who knew when it would get washed again? A kid next door hammered at a piano. My mouth went dry, and I prayed to Jesus, God, Santa, the tooth fairy, that he'd stop before the racket woke Mom. My heart raced as I wrestled with the new sheet. I jumped when the door banged open. Her hair was a black waterfall that spilled past her bare breasts to her waist. Her eyes, bloodshot and wild, told me there was no escape. My bladder screamed to release water that hadn't been there a minute before, and I shivered, not just from cold, but outright fear. She flew at me like a tornado and pushed me onto the soiled sheets. I choked back vomit as she used my hair to smear my face into my mess. While calling me names I can't make myself repeat. Screaming, crying was always gasoline to her fire, so I tried my best to go limp and disappear into myself. "Don't come in, Jared, don't come in," I sent my mental message. It was my job to protect him from her, not the other way around. Next door, the piano fell silent. "Stick together," my mother said to us on the rare mornings she was awake when we went to school. No matter what, you take care of each other. And we did. Daddy had a hard time holding a job, and Mom didn't work. So we moved around a lot. Sometimes it felt like we moved every month, and that heat and water were luxuries of the rich. In 6th grade, an ice storm ground Indianapolis to a halt. Jer and I joked about how whiny the whole city was. Our one-bedroom house had one barely working radiator heater. We slept in the uninsulated garage. All winter, we kept our beds pulled away from the ice-covered walls of our bedroom. Compared to waking up next to a literal wall of ice, a little ice outside was nothing. We sat together, huddled in a fuzzy brown blanket in front of the radiator, and counted how many schools we'd been to. I used one of Daddy's flat construction pencils to keep track on the back of a publisher's clearinghouse envelope. Jer took off his forever broken glasses and shook his head when we finished our list at almost 20. We tried to guess how many more schools we'd attend before graduation, and I felt sorry for him because his number would be higher than mine. By then, our traumas had bonded us in a way that seemed unbreakable. As we grew up, though, my brother and I grew apart. When you went to college, he told me, you broke your promise to look out for me. I needed you more than ever, but you left. I hated you for that. It felt like he carved my heart out with a rusty knife. That first semester, I said, I was so worried about you. I wanted to come back, but how would that help? What would I do? Ask for my job back at Skate World? Go back to paying the rent for Mom and Dad so they could keep partying? I cried all the time. But the best way I could help you was to help myself. That way, if you needed a place to run, you could run to me. Dannie, he said in one of the last conversations we had after I told him I was cutting Mom out of my life. You can't just disown her. I know it seems small, but she can't even pull her head out of her ass long enough to remember her only grandchild's birthday, just like she never remembered ours. If she can't spare 2 minutes to call, she's the one giving up, not me. Oh, you know, Mom, she's never been good about that kind of thing. It's not fair to expect her to change now. It's not just about birthdays, though, Jer. It's about a lifetime of abuse and chaos, and I'm done. So, you're gonna abandon Mom like you abandoned me? After that, we just stopped talking. Three years later, Jer died alone in a room he rented from a friend, from a seizure that I'm certain was caused by a brain injury my mother gave him when we were kids. He died angry with me for not giving Mom more chances to turn her life around. And he died still hurt that I abandoned him. I was so pissed at myself for letting that distance fall between us. When he needed me, I hadn't stuck with him. And now, the only person who went through the same shitstorm childhood I had was just gone. I no longer believe blood's thicker than water, but I do believe with all my heart that family sticks together. The thing is, sometimes family's a matter of choice, not biology. Sterling and I have been married for nearly 17 years. We're both abuse survivors, and he cut his family out years ago, too. That's created more challenges than I can count, but it's also helped us to understand one another in ways no one else ever could. My family is a unit of 3. Sometimes that's painful. Our poor son certainly won the Shitty Grandparent Lottery. Sometimes it's hard as hell, but no matter what's happening in our life, we 3 are one hell of a unit. Every single day, my husband and I fight for the privilege to be a family. And as my 15-year-old son nears adulthood, I desperately hope he'll take the lesson of sticking together, but with a twist. I hope he understands that he's free to choose his own life, loves, and relationships. I hope he's secure enough to walk away from toxic people. And God, I hope that anyone he spends his life with will fight as hard for the honor of being his family as we are. And if they're not, well, sometimes letting go is just as important as sticking together.